Good morning, grinders. Oh, a little losing my voice a little. Here, there. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. This is the pregame show, the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka Blenderhead, Blender HD. If you want to follow me on Twitter, and it's Tuesday, June 28th. We're almost getting to July. It's still hot outside. Still pretty hot. Not that much weather for baseball. There hasn't been much rain going around, so that's pretty good. I don't know. I'll check on for tonight's slate. 15 games tonight. But I'll be here answering your DFS strategy questions like I always do in the YouTube chat. Good morning, Doug Montgomery. Give me those thumbs ups. First thing in the door. That's what you got to do. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Hit whatever you want. Brian C. 1089. Good morning. Brett Booth. Suki Singh. Not here first, but good morning. I don't get the I don't know. Am I not getting the dates on the toggle timestamps? Okay, now I'm getting the timestamps, and it was turned off, right? Even though I could obviously go in order, but I could see Suki Singh was not the first in. Trey's here. Good morning. Steve in the chat. Good morning. Who stacked the Dodgers yesterday? Well, if you did, you lost, right? Chad Cool, complete game shutout. We don't have results DB updated right now early in the morning. They'll probably do that soon, I guess an hour or two or something like that. But we would take a look at yesterday's slate, but essentially, basically all the chalk failed. Basically, I mean, did anyone do well? I mean, even the chalk pitchers like Jordan Montgomery, like he got into trouble. He ended up with 12 points. Kirby got it was fine like the first inning, and then just kind of gives up 4 home runs. So we have a Shrek. Shrek won first place in the large field DraftKings of the 5-3 Orioles plus Yankees, a non-Dodgers lineup, and amazingly enough, I didn't lose that much money yesterday. Remember, I'm kind of doing my little experiment, playing primarily 3-mans, 5-mans, small field GPPs. I cashed in the 121 yesterday. I played a twin stack, but I didn't play the right people. I had Kirilloff and Gordon, but then I also had Kepler and Buxton. They had 0. Should have had Urshela and Sanchez. But then I had Gausman and Montgomery in lineup, and it got enough, I think, 90 points, cashed at least, right? But even in my 3-mans or whatever, here's a triple up. Not a 31-man triple up. I scored 54 points, and I still tripled my money. And it's primarily because of looking for those intercorrelated players in your lineup. And having a slightly less projection. So instead of playing, essentially what I did primarily is didn't play Will Smith, didn't play Trey Turner, and ended up playing O'Neal Cruz, who hit a home run, and Mitch Garver, who hit a home run. So that's what saved me, right? Because I still had Kirby and Montgomery. But look at the ownership here. I mean, turns out I couldn't get rid of like Muncy without losing that much projection. Couldn't get rid of Trace Thompson at 2,000 without losing too much projection. But if you take a look at some of the lineups, like, Utica, I mean, everyone's kind of sharing similar players. Soto is 48% owned in this triple up. Trace Thompson, Trey Turner, Muncy, Smith, Freeman, right? Giolito here, 7% over here. But like John Avere, who's good. I expected to see this line. Like, this lineup is what I expected to see. I expected to see Smith, Muncy, Turner, Thompson, Soto. And then some may have Freeman, some may have Vogelback there. I expected a little Nelson Cruz possible. So I was Xing out these people. All right, take a look at where's is BK Reader here? No, is another one. Right, very similar lineup. Soto, Michael Franco, 3%, but still Kirby and Montgomery. Fire Dog up here. Similar lineup. Soto, Thompson, Turner, Muncy, Vogelback, Smith, Kirby, but with Wainwright here instead of Montgomery. My lines weren't all that different from these because I did play the 2 chalk pitchers, and I did play most of the. I just didn't play Soto. I played Ohtani instead of Soto. I played Reynolds instead of whoever, Cruz, whoever else would fit there. Then didn't pay all the way up for Trey Turner, but still I paid more for Freddie Freeman, which I didn't need to do. Still played the 2 chalk pitchers. So it wasn't that different. I mean, a lot of times, now we have a 15-game slate. And also yesterday was a 9-game slate, and the Dodgers had almost a 7-run total. And some of these guys were a little underpriced. So, like, projection-wise, if I X'd out all the Dodgers, I would have given up 8 to 10 points of projection. And in these types of contests, I don't know if it's worth it. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. I don't know. I don't know where the line is. That's why I got Daniel Hutchins in here. Nerdy Tenor. He'll tell me where the line is. Cam IM says double up was like 39 points to cash yesterday. Right, of course, because that's what happens when you have chalk pitchers that one that really fails, and then an entire stack that fails. And then in my 121, I played 3 Dodgers in my lineup, but I played Justin Turner, Gavin Lux, and Chris Taylor. So at least Lux got a hit. Right. So at least I got 3 points out of that. But with Kirilloff, but in the 121, the Twins were barely owned. So like Kirilloff was 1% owned, and Gordon was like 1% owned, and then I and then I didn't play Kirby. I played Gausman and Montgomery. Yay! That worked out. But yeah, but I also saw a lot of people like in the large field, because I put my entries in the large field contest primarily so I could just grab the CSV. I don't At worst, they're slightly negative EV. At worst, depending on it, maybe even be plus EV. My small field GPP lineup is probably plus EV, but probably doesn't have as much win equity. My this type of lineup, probably not. But I throw them in just so I could get the data. But I looked in and you wouldn't believe how many correlated players there are to Dodgers stacks. So like that's one thing that we've been talking about for the past 2 weeks, about not correlation inside your lineup, but correlation with other lineups in the contests. So like if you were to play a Dodger stack, you're much more likely to have Kirby in your lineup. Because he was the cheapest chalky, he's 7,100. And if you're paying up for like Trey Turner at 6,300 or whatever he was on DraftKings, you're more like those lineups are more likely to have Kirby in it. More likely to have Kirby Montgomery. Less likely to have Gausman in it at 9,800 or whatever he was. They were more likely, if we take a look at, like, where was John's lineup? Right, if we take a look at, you're more likely to have one expensive batter in your lineup. If you're playing Kirby, if you're playing the Dodgers 5-man Kirby, you're probably playing Soto. Playing Soto or possibly Ohtani, maybe Mike Trout. You have a spot that's high up, especially if you're playing Trace Thompson in your stack. If you weren't playing Trace Thompson in your Dodgers stack, then you don't play the cheap. You have to play a cheap outfielder. So you're more likely to have like Sawinski or someone like that in your lineup. In those types of lineups, even with Kirby. I know this may sound a little bit confusing, but just think logically of how things would put themselves together. If you don't play Freeman in your Dodger stack, you're more likely to pay down and have Vogel back at 2,500. So there are more lineups. This is the lineup that is, the players are more correlative to each other, even if they're not in a stack. So there are more lineups that have Trace Thompson and Juan Soto together than Trace Thompson and someone else. So let's say you weren't even playing the Dodgers and you weren't even playing the Nationals. And you're like, well, I'm going to play a 5-man stack and then play Thompson and Soto in the outfield as one-offs. If you could sacrifice barely anything and play 2 different people, or at least play one person different, you'd get off a combination of Trace Thompson and Juan Soto, who are in a lot of lineups together. Save for Vogelback. Like, we take a look here. Like, if you built a 5-man Dodger stack on DraftKings yesterday and used decent projections, you would be getting a lot. That's what the lineups would look like. So playing like a George Springer instead, playing a Vlad at first base instead of Freeman. Even if you're building a Dodgers stack, you can at least get off of the common builds like that. Find a different cheap pitcher. Don't play Trace Thompson. Don't play Trey Turner at the shortstop spot. Right? Now, obviously, teammates are correlative to each other because people stack. That makes sense. So, like, if you lineups that have Soto in it are more likely to have Cruz in it. So lineups with Vogelback in it are more likely to have O'Neill, Cruz, and Brian Reynolds in it. That's obvious. Like, we don't have to explain that. People stack. So you're going to see more people that have Muncy in it will have Justin Turner or Will Smith in the lineup because they're playing 5 Dodgers or 4 Dodgers or 3 Dodgers. But it's those one-offs. It's those other combinations that could give you a little bit even more of an edge. So if we take a look at like today's slate, for instance, and I'm going to be using the plate IQ projections just so everything is kind of aligned with the ownership. You're looking at projections and ownership from the same source. So let's just say today the Dodgers are going to be chalky, right? That they have the 6.6 run total. So if you're like, if people are playing 5-man Dodger stacks, what are the more likely one-offs to be in those lineups? What are the likely pitchers to be in those lineups? And we're basing ourselves on that everyone's using the same projections, right? So as this example, as of 11 in the morning, we're just using the plate IQ projections as if it's gospel. You could do this with the bat projections. You could do this with other people's projections. Aggregate them to get a sense what other people are going to do. But let's just say that the plate IQ projections were the aggregate projections. I just always have to highlight that because we're going to point out people that it may not be true on this coming slate. I'm doing this as an example, showing you on the screen. So if we just go to stacks, we go, okay, we're going to build 5X, 100%, and we're going to build all Dodger stacks. I'm going to find out if everyone was using these projections to some reasonable degree. What players show up correlative to Dodgers players, even though they're not on the Dodgers? So I'm gonna set this. I'm gonna set this to 100 for time purposes, and we're not gonna do anything else. Salary doesn't matter. Nothing. Just nothing. We're just running it. I'm gonna run 100 lineups, and it'll be all 5-man Dodger stacks. What pitchers show up? What other batters show up more than others? Because using this type of information, then you could say, well, especially if you're building a single entry lineup where the ownership gets even more condensed, you could go, it's like, okay, maybe I don't play the Dodger stack, but maybe I play one of them as a one-off, right? You play a 5-man whatever stack, but then you play Muncy and someone else together. We're more likely to be in Dodger stacks anyway. So maybe you don't play those two together. You want to get away from the overlap in your contests. Okay, so we're getting 100% Trace Thompson, getting Rodon. Okay, so here's the top one according to the plate IQ projections. You get a Will Smith, Max Muncy, Trey Turner, Trace Thompson, Chris Taylor. Then you get Kyle Garlick, who's in the projected Twins lineup, batting 4th. Josh Smith, who's projected to lead off for the Rangers for 2,400. And Michael Chavis, projected to bat 3rd at 2,000. Right, these little cheapies. Right, I'm glad that little cheapies show up. I'm really glad. Chavis, Smith, Garlick, with Ray and Rodon, the two probably the chalkiest pitchers on the slate. But then you got, obviously, one of the chalkiest stacks on the slate. Go down to the second one. Okay, 5-man Dodger stack, Ray and Rodon. I think Ray and Rodon are showing up in almost all of them. Like, if we Rodon in 100%, Ray in 88%. So what other pitcher shows up instead? Zach Wheeler. Okay, it's essentially double stud lineups with Dodgers. There are cheapies out there. So we got Diego Castillo is 2,100, batting 5th. Ortega is 2,900 for the Cubs, batting 2nd, projected. Right? We start scrolling down, and they changed the display on this a little, so you don't have to scroll. Just do this. Franmil Reyes, 2,700. Jordan Luplow, 2,600 in the outfield. Taylor Trammell, 2,600. Still got Chavis and Castillo. So if we take away the Dodgers and the pitchers, Michael Chavis, 83% of lineups of 100. Right? Obviously, there are a lot of different Dodgers combinations. You have Angel Alberto, Justin Turner, but Diego Castillo, Michael Chavis, Daniel Vogelback, Pirates, Austin Slater, Rafael Ortega, Kyle Garlick. Like, these are all cheapies Franmil Reyes. Basically, double stud, all cheapies. So you have to think that if people are going to be playing a lot of double stud lineups, Rodon and Ray, and going to be playing the Dodgers, a lot of these cheapies are going to be over-owned in combination with one another, especially if people are just, using optimizers, right? It's going to jam in these 2K types of players in order to fit into your stack. Because even if we took away the Dodgers, like let's say what we did, I'm gonna do this. Even if we took away the Dodgers, I'm gonna speculate. I'm gonna go to the Dodgers. Where are the Dodgers? Where'd the Dodgers go? Right? I'm gonna X them out. I'll exclude them. Let's go. Boop, 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 bye. Okay. And now we're gonna make 5-man stacks of whatever it comes up. Where is this? It's not 100 Dodgers. So no Dodgers. No Dodgers whatsoever. And now let's make 5-man stacks, 5X stacks with whoever's the next best projected team. Right? So let's build 100 lineups that have no Dodgers in it. And let's see what players not in stacks are correlated to those lineups. MJC is in the chat. What's up? Nothing. Same stuff, different day, right? Same stuff. Hit that thumbs up button. So if we build 5-man stacks, I'm going to guess that we're going to get some pirate stacks. We saw those cheapies, Castillo, Vogelbach. Who else? In that, Chavis. We may be getting some of those. And I think in the more expensive stacks, we're going to be getting those as one-offs. Franmil Reyes one. We're going to still get a lot of those guys as one-offs. So either they're going to be part of stacks. You'll see a Cleveland stack with Franmil Reyes. You'll see a Ranger stack with Josh Smith. But of course, we know that players on the same team are correlated to each other in other people's lineups. We know that. We don't have to run lineups to tell. It's like, oh, Corey Seager and Josh Smith are going to be correlated to each other. Yeah, that's right. Oh, look, we get all the pirate stacks. We get so many pirate stacks and double stud pitchers. So you're getting Wheeler, Rodon, Kirk, Slater, Soto. So you get Soto here. So this is more of a cheap stack because like Brian Hayes is only 4,400. Brian Reynolds is 4,400. Okay. So like I said, okay, we don't get Vogelbach there. Oh, because Vogelbach's not because Chavis is in first base. Sorry. So against the lefty. You get a bunch of these lineups. So let's see what's correlated to these lineups. Alejandro Kirk. Okay. We're getting a ton of Kirk, ton of Slater, Springer, Lane Thomas, Mike Trout. Not getting as much Ray. Yeah, because Wheeler's even more expensive than Ray. So based on these two builds, if you were to play the Dodgers or not play the Dodgers, like Alejandro Kirk is not as correlative to the Dodgers lineups, but Alejandro Kirk is more correlative to the one-offs that you'd be playing in Dodgers lineups. Okay? So Dodgers lineups would not have Kirk. So Alejandro Kirk, let me get rid of that. So think of this logic tree. Okay, so think of this logic tree. Now, none of this is stuff that you have to do, but think of this conceptually. This is the type of stuff we talk about in the theory of daily fantasy sports. 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. We talk about this conceptually in here. Now I'm kind of applying that concept in actuality, which will be part of the second course. Right? Okay, so we've learned, assuming that we're using, everyone's using similar projections, that Dodgers are going to be more correlated to Michael Chavis, Diego Castillo, Daniel Vogelbach. Okay? So the Dodgers players, they're going to be Pirates players in Dodgers lineups. More likely, more so than not. And then in Dodgers stack and in Pirates stacks, you're going to see more Alejandro Kirk You're going to see Blue Jays, right? Springer, 31. Alejandro Kirk, 77. Everyone else is kind of like a mix in. But these are the two main ones. Blue Jays correlate more to the Pirates. Okay? So now a Dodgers lineup is more likely to have Chavis and Castillo. Let's use those two as the perfect examples. Okay? So Castillo, Chavis, Kirk, and a Dodger are too correlated to each other. So if you were to play Michael Chavis and Diego Castillo, you didn't want them to overlap with as many lineups, you wouldn't play them with a catcher such as Kirk or Will Smith. If you wanted to play Michael Chavis as a one-off, you want to avoid the Blue Jays in addition to the Dodgers. Or at least Springer and Kirk, based on this. Obviously, the other Pirates are correlated to each other. You can't avoid that. If you're playing a Pirate stack, like maybe if you're playing a Pirate stack, you don't play this lineup. Wheeler, Rodon, Kirk, Chavis, Chang, Hayes, Castillo, Happ, Springer. You go, well, what does it look like without Kirk and Springer in there? Because more people will play them together because they're the highest projected non-Dodgers that you could play. But are the Blue Jays and the Dodgers correlated to each other? No, because there's a price. Now let's say you wanted to play. Let's say you wanted to play the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. Let's say how about this? Let's bring the Dodgers back. Now that we see that the Pirates are more correlated to the Dodgers, or at least some of the Pirates are more correlated to the Dodgers, let's X those guys out. So I go, okay, well, if I wanted to play a Dodger stack, right? We're gonna go back to Dodger stacks. I'm gonna put 100%. We go back to 100%. Dodger stacks. And where are we going? Okay, so we're going to, I can just go to my lineups page and do this, right? So here are the Dodger stacks. And it's like, okay, well, how about Dodger stacks that don't have Chavis and don't have Castillo and don't have Vogelback, right? So we're kind of getting rid of the Pirates, right? Get rid of all these Pirates. Get rid of all the Pirates that came up. Okay, so now what is it going to be? Now I'm assuming we're going to get a lot more Josh Smith. Get a lot more Austin Slater, or Rafael Ortega, or Garlic, Lupo, Josh Smith. A whole bunch of these people. So let's see. I'm going to run 100 lineups. 5-man Dodger stacks. Because if you want to run a Dodger stack, you're more likely, more of your opponents are more likely to have Pirates one-offs based on what we see here. So let's say we don't run Pirates one-offs. What do we get instead? To be less correlative with other lineups in the contest. Because a lot of times people make combinations that are just like, oh yeah, your lineup looks like a lot of other lineups. It's just a 2v2. It's much harder to win a GPP that way. Okay, so we're still getting the pitchers, so we're not going to worry about the pitchers for now. Okay, so we're getting a lot more Josh Smith, Ortega, Pujols. Is he playing today? Carlos Santana. Okay, it's kind of a mix of everything, but we're getting a lot more Josh Smith. So here's a Dodger stack with Alberto at second base, Votto, Smith, Ortega. Okay, so you're getting away from the potential one-offs that would be in Dodger stacks, but I think Josh Smith is also more likely to be correlated with Dodgers at third base. Obviously, he's not going to be correlated to Justin Turner, right? Because they're both only third base eligible. I think DraftKings made him only third base, Josh Smith. He's not an outfield eligible player anymore. So obviously, two players that are hard-coded into one position that's not an outfielder cannot possibly be correlated to each other. Right? Joey Votto and Freddie Freeman have a correlation of 0. Because you can't play them together. On DraftKings, on FanDuel, you can't. So if you do play Josh Smith in your lineup, Josh Smith lineups and Justin Turner Dodger stacks don't exist together. That correlation is 0. because they can't. So lineups with let's use logic. If Josh Smith is going to be a popular one-off, which also raises the ownership of the Rangers stack. So let's think logically. Let's think logically through this. If Josh Smith and Justin Turner are correlated 0, they cannot be in the same lineup. Josh Smith is much more correlated to Trey Turner and Muncy, Smith, and Freeman. So that means Corey Seager lineups. So if you have a shortstop, Corey Seager, that means you're not playing Trey Turner. But if you're playing Corey Seager, you're more likely to be playing Josh Smith. So Corey Seager and Justin Turner don't have a correlation of 0 because you can't play them together. But they're less likely to be together because Seager is going to be in Ranger stacks with Josh Smith. So if you're playing Seager, you're more likely to be correlated with what other Dodgers? Freeman, Smith, Thompson, Taylor, those guys. If you're playing Garver at catcher or whatever, Time, whoever for Texas, obviously you can't play Will Smith also. They're both catcher only, which means they're 0 correlated. But if you're playing Garver, you're more likely to be playing Josh Smith. And you're more likely to be playing Corey Seager. And you're more likely to be playing Marcus Semien. So a Rangers stack is more likely to be correlated with Freddie Freeman and Trace Thompson based on positional eligibility of who the better projected players at their positions. So if you knew the Dodgers were chalk and you didn't want to, and you're like, I don't mind using Dodgers as one-offs, and you're going to play the chalkiest version of the Rangers stack, you're more likely to play Freeman. Now, if you played Nate Lowe at first base, let's say for the Rangers, then you're probably on less combinations of other Rangers stacks. Like imagine playing a Rangers stack and don't play Josh Smith though. You play Justin Turner in that spot. Now you're going to be less correlated, even though those Rangers and Dodgers, if you're building like a 5-3 or something, or 5-2-1 or 5X lineup, there will be some overlap. But most people playing a Ranger stack will be playing Josh Smith. So why don't you play a Ranger stack without Josh Smith and play Justin Turner there? Because Ranger stacks most likely do not have Justin Turner in them. Ranger stack most likely don't have Trey Turner in them. Play a Ranger stack that doesn't have Seager or Smith. So now you can play Turner and Justin Turner and then play Nate Lowe and Semien and Adolis Garcia, whoever in the outfield. This is inter-lineup correlation or field correlation, as I would call it. This is lineup construction dynamics, how lineups fit together. And this is outside of even the pitchers we're even talking about. That's why I just discounted, just to understand the concept. So if we're not going to even play Josh Smith in these lineups, like what's going to end up happening, you'll see. I'm going to X out Josh Smith. So you're like, well, I want to play the 2 chalky pitchers and I want to play a Dodger stack today. It's like, you can. Of course, it's a chalky lineup, but how do you build differently? Well, you're going to see what ends up happening. I'm going to take out Josh Smith and I'm going to take out Rafael Ortega. Because if you're not playing those guys, you're still probably playing a Dodger stack with some cheap guys. Now I'm going to build 100 lineups like this. So I eliminate Josh Smith and Ortega because they're too correlated, 2 Dodger stacks with 2 expensive pitchers. Because you're going to run into so many lineups that look similar to it. And you could probably build just as high projected lineups or decently enough high, not sacrifice much, without being on 2v2s and 3v3s. Or 1v1s even. So here's 100 lineups. So now we're fitting them in. Okay, Kyle Garlick, Carlos Santana, Austin Slater, 3,100, 2,500, 2,900. Okay? What do you notice? Okay, this is very important. This is very important especially if you're using lineup builders and optimizers. Okay, like Lineup HQ. What do you notice? It's jamming in, expensive. Obviously, Trace Thompson is cheap. The Dodgers, 2 expensive pitchers and giving you basically the highest projected point per dollar batters. So if we look at this, like from a point per dollar standpoint on this, let's scroll over. Come on. Well, let's do this. It's a little slow. Right? Upton, Trace Thompson, Upton, Grossman, Marsh, Pujols, O'Hearn, Garlick, because we need outfielders. That's why. Garlick, Luplow. Like just jamming these guys in, Framil Reyes, because of point per dollar value. Not necessarily ceiling or anything. That doesn't necessarily make them just because they're under 3K doesn't make them like you have to play them. These guys easily go 0 for 4. So if you're constantly doing this, you're just going to keep on most of the time you're going to keep on replacing some cheap batter, right? 2,900, 2,500. So you'll be like, "Oh, well, what are you doing now? You're playing the same lineup and now you're just playing 3 other cheap one-offs." Like you're not that different. You're different than the more owned one-offs. You don't have Diego Castillo in there. You don't have Michael Chavis in there. But now you got a similar person in there for lower ownership. But your lineup still looks the same. So what can you do? What do all these lineups have in common? They have 2 more expensive pitchers. So especially if people are using optimizers and they're trying to like get different, they're going to do stuff like this and not realize that, yeah, their ownership sum is going down, but their lineup, their inter lineup correlation with the field is not changing much. So how could we change this dramatically? By still playing a Dodger stack with 3 one-offs. Well, why do we have to play 2 expensive pitchers? So let's look at the pitcher pool. Let's just look at point like these lineups don't have JP Sears in it, or Ross Stripling, or Patrick Corbin, or even Luis Castillo for 8,100. Right? So let's take a look at if we didn't play, let's look at raw points. Rodon and Wheeler. So Rodon projects for the most, Robbie Ray. Once we drop down, then we get Woodruff at 9,900, Morton at 9,700, and Luis Castillo at 8,100. So that isn't that bad. So let's say instead of Ray, we drop down $1,400 for Luis Castillo. We'll be giving up, 3.5 points in projection? But maybe much different. So I'm going to take out, I'm going to lock in Luis Castillo. Okay, so now we're playing an $8,100 pitcher. Now it may pair it up with Rodon, Wheeler, Ray, but we're giving the lineup like another $1,400. Another, some amount of money that could be spent on other positions. Okay, you could go down even further if you want. You could try JP Sears or whatever. But let's just say Luis Castillo. He's the cheapest for the raw points. Right? Shane Baz is there, 7,600. So I'm going to build 100 lineups with Luis Castillo in it. And see how the lineups look different. Brian C1809 says, if the top 15 position players are at least 30% owned, I will set a rule that says for my lineups to have at most 2 players with at least 30%. Yeah, that's a blunt way of doing stuff. You have to hard code stuff that way. You can just go by ownership product. You don't need to do that. That's one way to just bulk cut out a bunch of lineups. But understand there are going to be lineups that have 30% owned players that are still plus EV. You're just saying I don't even want to look at that bucket. Right? So it's not right or wrong. It's just that you have these buckets. Right? You have these buckets with the 30% owned players. Right? Let's say there's 5 of them. Right? There's 30% owned players. Do I want to play all 5 of them in my lineup? Well, that's one bucket. 4 of them in your lineup is another bucket. 3 of them in your lineup is another bucket. And maybe in the bucket that has all 5 of them, like it has a whole bunch of marbles in there, like a whole bunch of black marbles, horrible marbles. And you need to find the green ones. There are green ones in there, but there's a lot more black marbles, right? Over-owned lineups that are negative EV. But there are plus EV lineups in there. There are green marbles. If you could go through and pick them out, You're fine. You don't have to set a rule for that. Then you go to the next one, which is for 30% owned players. There's tons of black marbles in there, but there's a little bit more green marbles in there. Not as many as the black ones, but there's still plenty in there. And if you could find them, you could take them. Then you go to the one with the 3. Now you see a lot more green marbles. There's still more black marbles, but there's more to choose from. Then you go to the one where you're only playing 2 of them, and now there are actually more green marbles than black marbles in that thing. And then you have one that have none of them, and it's mostly all green marbles. Not as many marbles though, but almost all of them are green. So you know that if you cut off and you say, well, I don't want to play any more than 2 30% owned players in my lineup like that, you're basically saying, I'm just not even going to bother to look through those first 3 big containers of marbles, right? Just because by accident, you could start picking out lineups that are not plus EV. At least if I'm choosing from these 2 other buckets, these jars of marbles, I'm more likely to play plus EV lineups even just by accident. While you have to be much more careful if you're playing 5 30% owned players in your lineup. So that is essentially what you're doing. It doesn't mean that you can't have 3, 4, 5 30% owned players in your lineup and automatically be negative EV. You just have to really find a way to get leverage elsewhere. Okay, so I put Luis Castillo in. So what this did is that it actually gave me less Hanger Alberto, who's cheap and projected to be in the Dodgers lineup, and still is giving me some of these cheapies. Carlos Santana, Taylor Trammell, Carlos Santana, Garlic Reyes. What spots is it filling now? Well, a lot of times it's filling an outfield spot and a first baseman spot. So I'm not really getting as much like Freddie Freeman. Is Freddie Freeman even playing today? Is that the reason I'm not getting him? Let's take a look. I just want to make sure. Let's look at RotoGrinders. Let's look at the starting lineups page. Am I missing something that Freeman is not projected to be in? Let's see. Starting lineups. What is this project? No, Freeman's in. Freeman, we have projected in. So Freeman, Taylor, Bellinger aren't really coming up in the stacks as much, right? Because they're a little bit more expensive than what they did. I mean, they're still cheap for cores. So maybe, how do we stop getting cheap first basemen in these stacks? So we already got rid of Alberto by playing Castillo. But I mean, we could just get rid of Trace Thompson, but all that's going to do is just now replace Trace Thompson with another cheap outfielder. So why don't we put Chris Taylor in the outfield? So we remove one of these cheapy outfielders that are showing up that will be correlated to a lot of Dodgers stacks. So let's just make sure to play Taylor. And what I'm doing here, this is what you could do for single entry. Like, just because I'm using lineup HQ doesn't mean I'm building 100 lineups. I'm using it as a research tool, right? So let's see. So let's say we still play Trace Thompson, but we play Chris Taylor also. So I'm going to lock Chris Taylor in to force him into the stacks. Now let's take a look. I'm going to start building a less lineups, 50 lineups. Trying to get this Dodgers 5-man lineup, 5-man stack lineup, to look different from other Dodgers lineups. So I could play a chalky stack, a chalky team in a different way. Okay, so you're getting Taylor in here. You're getting David McKinnon at third base. You're getting Edmund Sosa at third base. You're getting Edmundo Sosa. Okay, you're getting cheap Michael Frank. You're still getting cheapies. So let's play Chris Taylor. Let's put in Freddie Freeman also. Let's see what happens. To try to make our Dodgers stacks look different from other Dodgers stacks. I'm going to put it down to 20. We could run through these a little bit quicker. I'm trying to get you in the mindset of lineup construction dynamics. Okay, so you're getting Sosa, Slate. You're still getting these cheapies. Cal Raleigh is a cheapie, right? Because you're still paying up for Rodon. Austin Slate. Now you're getting more Dodgers. Jonah Bride, Kyle Garlick. So why don't we take out the pitchers? We're going to be losing projection. Now you have to admit that we're going to be dropping some projection. Right? So let's say I'm going to take out Rodon also, and Ray, and Wheeler. Right? Okay, so we're taking out the 3 highest raw projected pitchers. I don't know how much projection sacrifice we're going to take, but let's see. And forcing in Freeman and Taylor. I built 20 lineups. Okay, so let's look at the top lineup from the Rodon build. This is at 122.5. What's this top? 119.6. Okay, we're not really getting rid of that much projection. We got rid of Rodon in our lineups. And we didn't sacrifice that much. 3 points? That's not that bad. That's really not that bad at all. But now we're playing JP Sears, right? Now we're playing a cheaper pitcher. We're still playing Hayes and Slater in this lineup, and Kirk. And Kirk is more likely to be what? Like we said before, correlated to Pirates lineups. Okay, so maybe we don't want to put those two together. Sosa, Lane Thomas. We're still getting cheapies in here. Because the Dodgers are very expensive. Michael Franco, Austin Slater. Okay, so Sears Castillo. I still want to start getting rid of more cheapies. So get rid of Slater. Get rid of Thomas. Get rid of Brian Hayes. I don't want Pirates in my Dodgers lineups. And then we get Franmil Reyes, Taylor Trammell, Jordan Luplow, Kyle Garlick. Let's just start getting rid of all these guys. I don't mind Trace Thompson because he's part of the Dodgers stack. Now we're getting down to people that are like, okay, probably not going to be in these lineups. So let's see. Let's run 20 and see this. 119.68, 118.04. Not that bad. Okay, this isn't that bad. Justin Upton. We're just getting different. We're still getting different cheapies. Grossman, Marsh, Sears Castillo, Kirk, Longoria, Nelson Cruz. But for single entry, this is fine. Third base, so people would not be playing Trey Turner in these types of lineups. That play Justin Turner. Like if you're playing single entry, this is fine. I mean, let's go from the very beginning. 120. Okay, so this lineup, the lineup that we ran that has nothing excluded, nothing we don't care about, nothing, is at 128.34. It's a Dodgers stack. What you have Ray and Rodon and Chavis and Smith and some cheapy outfielder, a more typically owned cheapy outfielder. You're going to sacrifice 10 points, which remember, what's 10 points in baseball? That's less than the swing of a bat, right? A home run could make that up. And now you're playing a same Dodger stack, but 2 different pitchers. So you're losing ownership there and not playing any correlated one-offs to the lineups that would have 2 expensive pitchers in there. You're playing at different positions. You're not playing at first, yeah, a little bit at outfield. But even if you wanted to bring some of those back, you'd be fine. Maybe you'd find a way to play a Kirk lineup instead. Is there a Will? Let's go. Like even like this type of lineup. Like I like this. Playing an Alejandro Kirk lineup with the Dodgers. So yeah, I like this type of lineup even better from an overlap standpoint. That you're not playing, because look at this lineup. You're not playing any of the cheapy outfielders. The only cheapy outfielder you're playing is correlated to your stack, Trace Thompson. Evan Longoria, Alejandro Kirk. Most likely, Dodger stacks will have Will Smith in there. They'll have Hansel Alberto or Justin Turner, or they'll have Josh Smith in this spot. A lot of lineups may have Soto in this spot, and you have Cruz, which is fine. They'll have, and then they also have Rodon and Ray or Wheeler, something like that. And you have Sears and Castillo. So you could pay up, basically, other than Thompson, you're paying up for Freeman, Muncy, and Trey Turner. And you're playing none of the cheapy outfielders that would be correlated with Dodgers. And you're sacrificing about 10 points. Is this too many points to sacrifice? I don't know. Where's the line? You're playing a 600-person contest. Is it worth being this different a pitcher? Well, to me, this is the way you play a chalky Dodger stack. Now, if you were going to just X out the Dodgers, then you wouldn't have to worry as much about being different a pitcher. I mean, that's the same concept that we talk about all the time. Well, I'm going to play chalk here. That means I got to be different elsewhere. So most likely, if you're playing the chalkiest stack, you're going to be different a pitcher somewhat. If you're playing a 1% don't stack, you're more likely to be chalky at pitcher. But this is the process of thinking through what players are correlated to other players in other people's lineups. And I'm not talking about on the same team. Obviously, all the Blue Jays are correlated to each other because people are more likely to play them in a stack. But if people are not going to play Will Smith in their lineup in a Dodger stack, they're more likely to have who? Well, some cheap catcher. There's have to be a cheap catcher. It's most likely they have Will Smith the catcher and a cheap first baseman. And you can just run through the projections and see that. Now, this is obviously, like I said before, I'm going through as if the plate IQ projections are gospel. Talking about if you could do this through multiple projection sets. Go to the bat and do this. Go to X sites projections, do it. Aggregate them all together and do it. To see what other people are going to be utilizing in their lineup builders. And a lot of people, especially that don't understand what they're doing, they're just like, I'm just going to set exposures. The people that build by exposure are going to start jamming in. You're going to wonder why, all my good lineups have Josh Smith in it. All my good expensive stacks have Josh, because why wouldn't they? He's the best point per dollar value at third base. And your stack doesn't have a good third baseman in it. So it's going to have Josh Smith. But I only have 18% Josh Smith. Yeah, but that 18% is all in those types of lineups. You're going to find that Josh Smith is all correlated with also Carlos Rodon. So if one guy has a bad game, it doesn't matter what the other guy does because they're all in similar lineups together. How to get away from that? Unless you want to do that. Like if you're playing a very condensed group of lineups, sure, yeah, do whatever the hell you want. But it's more likely that your opponent's lineups will look like that. How do you get different? Instead of trying to get different in a 2v2, try to get different in a 5v5. Those types of difference. Different combinations. And this is helpful in any sport. Right? We're not just talking about baseball here. Football, any type of showdown, PGA. If you're playing a more expensive golfer in your lineup, you're playing Rory at 11K or something. Whoever the chalky 7K golfer is more likely to be in Rory lineups. I mean, it just makes sense. It's like, well, if I want to play him, I got to play that guy. So those two are going to be more lineups. We'll have them both together. So if you're going to play Rory in your lineup, maybe pick another 7K golfer, or change your construction that you don't even have to play a 7K golfer, because you know that these two are going to be close. These two golfers are going to be in a lot of lineups together. If Rory McIlroy is in 22% of lineups and the 7K guy is in 10% of lineups, a lot of that 10% of lineups is part of the 22% of Rory McIlroy. Do you want that? You could, and then you have to get different at the other four spots. But people look at that and they go, well, I want to be over the field on that guy and over the field on this guy, and not realize that they're all in the same lineups together. Even if you build in lineup HQ without knowing what you're doing, you will get that a lot. I'm going to build 150 lineups. I want 50% Rodon and 50% Robbie Ray. And then you build, and it shows you that you have 50% of each of 150 lineups. But it turns out that you have Ray and Rodon together in the 75 lineups, and neither of them in the other 75 lineups. That's still 50% of your portfolio. Or it could be that 50% of your lineups have Rodon and 50% of your lineups have Ray, and none of them are together. right? They have literally no overlap, right? Those are the two extremes. But just by looking over here oh, what's my exposure, will never tell you that. You actually have to look. Or you have to at least understand lineup construction dynamics so you can manipulate things. You go, okay, well, if I'm gonna have a lot of this guy, that means I'm gonna end up with a lot of that guy. So let me minimize my exposure to this guy so I don't get a lot of that guy. Like, you have to visualize how the lineups come together. That's why I knew going in that, okay, if you play a 5-man Dodger stack and you play 2 expensive pitchers, you're going to be playing a lot of these 2K crapper point per dollar value guys, which could be fine. But a lot of lineups are going to look like that. You're going to get a lot of Diego Castillo and Michael Chavis and whoever, and Carlos Santana in your lineups, in your Dodger stacks, right? Which will also make them higher on than they should be. So let's say you were to play an expensive stack that wasn't the Dodgers. Maybe you still don't play those guys, right? Because even if the Dodgers fail, they're more likely to have like Chavis in it or something like that. But also Chavis may end up being 12% owned for no reason, only because he fits into too many lineups. And maybe Carlos Santana is only 4% owned, and you'd rather play him for a 0.1 less projection to try to get even more different from the chalky-looking lineups. MJC says, does anyone feel like the smaller slates, 2 to 4 games versus the 9 to 15 game slates, are more valuable? No, I prefer the bigger slates. The more decisions that the field has to make, the more that sharp players have an edge, right? I prefer the big slates. The bigger, the better. 15-game slates, beautiful. 4-game slates, meh. 4-game slates are easier to figure out. Like, oh, everyone's going to do this, and here's the obvious thing that you don't do, right? Like that type of stuff. On a 15-game slate, a lot of times things get spread out enough that you're like, I don't know where the obvious points are. But that's for everyone, right? That's the thing. So figuring out what other people are going to do and what the lineup constructions are on a 15-game slate, as long as you don't run into very similar lineup constructions, you can build 100,000 lineups that are fine. If you want to talk more about this, you can come into the Blenders Game Theory channel in the RotoGrinders Discord. That's part of your premium subscription. You get Lineup HQ. You get all the content, all the projections, you get all the everything. You get everything you could possibly get at RotoGrinders. So click that link in the description, rotogrinders.com/premium. You can ask me anything you want in the Discord. We're going to do another coaching call on Friday night. And you can show me your screens. You can do whatever. It's your time. So if you want private coaching, just sign up for RotoGrinders Premium. But this concept that I'm talking about, that I walked through, the concept is in the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's in the construction section. Chapter 7, construction. We talk about it as a concept, right? Understanding why certain things fit into other things. That exists as a dynamic. Now, what I walk through is more of an application of that concept, which will be more in the second course, which is coming out about 4 to 6 weeks. But you can pick this one up. This is the basic course. The advanced course is coming out soon. But the basic, you're going to need this first. Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. How to think like a professional DFS player. The entire game theory. Not the entire game theory. But it's the game theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. Applies to all the sports. Doesn't matter. It's not just MLB. 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. Hit that notification bell. We're going to be going live later today. 15-game slate, 5 o'clock Eastern. Grinders live. Dean's there. Dean of the guys. 6:20 is crunch time. Brought to you by FanDuel. Kevin Roth. We're going over the weather. Is there any weather today? Let's see. I didn't even check. Obviously, there's weather. Is there bad weather? Nope. Doesn't look like there's anything. 80 degrees, wind blowing out. I don't think we have to worry about anything. It's gonna be easy. Easy peasy. So hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door. Helps us out. Like and subscribe. If you're listening on the podcast version of this, feel free to go on iTunes and rate, rated, review, say how great I am. That's beautiful. That's great. And yeah, tomorrow's Grinders Live. We have an early slate tomorrow. Where I think 1 o'clock is like the main slate. It's a split, whatever. So tomorrow would not be a pregame show. It'll just be a Grinders Live. I don't know what time that's going to start. Maybe 11:30, 11. I'll be on that show. It'll be me and Dean and someone else and whatever. It won't be this exact show, but I'll see you tomorrow anyway, right? We'll be going over that slate, answering your questions, right? I answer your questions even on those shows. So tune in, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit all the buttons, and I'll see you tomorrow for Grinders Live. Remember, tomorrow's Grinders Live. And then on Thursday, I'm back doing the same stuff that I normally do, answering your DFS strategy questions on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.